one of the issues that comes up, and it's a very difficult one to deal with, is the attitude towards violence in a society. So, for example, one of the ways that we hear the expression all the time, senseless violence. I think most recently I remember hearing it about the Charlie Hebdo attack in France, in which jihadis broke into the headquarters of Charlie Hebdo and killed 19 journalists for having done pictures making fun of the Prophet. And so John Kerry and I think President Obama both referred to it as senseless violence. Now, in a modern culture, all violence is senseless, but in an honor shame, in a pre-modern culture, to say senseless violence is not a tautology, like violence, all violence is senseless, but in fact it's an oxymoron. All violence is meaningful. There is no such thing as senseless violence, and certainly for the people who carried it out, for the jihadis who carried it out, this was very sensible violence. It had meaning. It had a direct meaning, which was, don't you dare, you Westerners, you infidels, don't you dare publish a picture of the Prophet. And so when there was a Guardian journalist who came to give a talk, and I went to listen to his talk, and he's explaining how the Guardian and others chose not to show the picture of the front cover of the Charlie Hebdo after the massacre, which was unquestionably a news item. And he said, well, we didn't do it out of fear. We did it out of sensitivity. For the feelings of Muslims, which is, you know, the same thing, because the sensibility of Muslims, particularly of jihadis, is that if you violate them, you can get killed. So of course you're going to be sensitive to that. Are you sensitive to the feelings of Christians when you do, you show a picture of an artwork of Christ in a jar of piss? You're not worried about them. They're not going to attack you. So, you know, on the one hand, you have this sort of moralizing, modern, we're generous, we don't, you know, gratuitously want to offend anybody, and so on and so forth, telling themselves that they're doing this voluntarily, that it's all part of this positive-sum world in which we'll be nice to them and they'll be nice to us. And on the other side, you have people engaged in not senseless violence, but meaningful violence, and getting precisely the results that they intend to get. So it's a good example of how when you have these two mentalities crisscrossing, you get agreement to the detriment of the positive-sum players. Now, I think one of the most striking things that got to me once in class was there was a discussion of two books, one by Christopher Browning called Ordinary Men, and it was about the 101st Police Battalion, German Police Battalion, which was basically after the conquest of Poland in charge of keeping order in Poland. And they were the ones who first received the orders to go into Jewish ghettos, communities, whatever, towns, and just round everybody up and shoot them at point-blank range. Men, women, children, old people, sick people, shoot them all. And then there was another book that dealt with the same archive of documents. There was a trial in the 60s, same archive of documents by Daniel Goldhagen in a book called Willing Executioners. And it was sort of, you know, on the one hand, Browning is saying, look, you know, they were offered the opportunity not to do it, but most of them did it because of the peer pressure and because it was difficult to say no, and even though they could say no and nobody was punished for saying no, they all agreed to, but they were reluctant and they felt forced into it. And he basically draws a picture in which at the end he can say, look, which of us can say for sure that we wouldn't be somebody who would get caught up in that machinery? Now, personally, I like to think of myself as somebody who, if told to shoot men, women, and children, there's no way I would do it. But okay, so, but Goldhagen goes in and looks at the same documents and comes out with ample evidence of eagerness to do that. willing executioners, including sadistic behavior and, volunteering to go above and beyond the call of duty to track down Jews who got away and kill them and so on. So he draws a very different picture, not of reluctant Germans, but in fact, the fact that only 5% of them accepted the opportunity not to do this shows really, terrible abilities to stand up to the multitude to do evil. So I say to my students, and Goldhagen's got evidence that clearly either Browning didn't see or didn't want to talk about because it didn't fit his thesis, but all the stuff about the sadism, the fact that there are women there who are encouraging them and so on, and it's an awful picture. And so I said to my students, well, which do you think is the better historian? So one of them says, I prefer Browning. And I said, why? And she said, well, because I think that Goldhagen dehumanizes them. And I said, how does he dehumanize them? She said, well, he depicts them as sadistic. Now, at that point I said, isn't sadism a particular human trait? I mean, what animal do we know that's sadistic? And she had to grant me that. But overall, her attitude was one of, look, we're all just good people here. And so let's not depict people as being mean. That's not nice to depict people as being mean. And so there's this kind of niceness that projects what sort of the best of what we want of ourselves onto a past event which was unquestionably sort of, the measuring stick for evil. And here she's saying, well, let's not dehumanize these guys. And they weren't even Nazis. Most of these people weren't members of the party. They were just, German policemen who got sent to Poland to man the gates. Anyway, so I think those are two good examples of the way in which we fail to understand what we're dealing with. I would say, and this is a term that others have used as well, that there's a kind of moral narcissism going on here, that we want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel that we're good people, and good people don't suspect other people of being bad. Because, among other things, if you come to the conclusion that somebody is bad, then you have to oppose them. So as long as you accept whatever somebody says as being bona fides, you don't have to oppose them. And if you're afraid of them, you want a lot of good excuses not to oppose them. So this desire to feel good about ourselves actually can be very dangerous. I think it's a very dangerous trait right now because it covers for cowardice. It covers for not confronting really bad stuff by insisting that it isn't really bad, and doing it on the principle of, heavens forbid that I should suspect somebody else of being a bad person.